Good evening, everyone. We are going to give us just another 60 seconds or so to make sure we can get a few more participants to attend or show up before we start the meeting. So hang tight for one more minute. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. It looks like it's about 5:02 on my watch here. So just a quick round of introductions. My name is Angela Foos. I'm the Assistant Director here at the City of Reno within the Development Services Department. Also joining me, we have Grace and Lauren, and I will ask them to do a quick introduction.
Hi, everyone. My name is Grace McAdin. I am a Senior Management Analyst for Development Services and Planning.
And I'm Lauren Knox. I'm a Senior Planner with Development Services as well.
Okay, great. Grace, let's go ahead and have you move to the next slide. Okay, so just for the group, this is the zoning code update discussion on our housing initiatives, just to make sure everyone knows where they're at. We are holding 3 stakeholder meetings to talk about some changes we are proposing specifically related to our zoning code and some things we can do to help with some of those housing initiatives. We have a short presentation. We're going to go over about 4 big topics. And then we had a meeting yesterday and it worked better to kind of have a little bit of questions intermixed during the presentation. So if you do have questions as I'm going through these slides, go ahead and raise your hand. Feel free also to wait until the very end if you have more of just global questions. But if it's something specific to maybe the topic that we're discussing on that slide, go ahead and wave your virtual hand and we'll, excuse me, move you over to the panelist section. Okay, so with that, go ahead, Grace. So kind of a higher level, we just wanted to let everyone maybe know what's not included. You know, as a city, we have a lot of different affordable housing, just housing initiatives that we're working on, whether it's fee waivers or things that we're doing for Section 8 housing, things that we're doing to help promote some of our initiatives. But we wanted to let you know that this is really specific to changes that we're making to our zoning code. So some of those other big housing policy discussions that we're having at the citywide level, that's not part of what this is today. We've also had a lot of feedback on or questions on accessory dwelling units. Those are granny flats or in-law quarters, basically a kind of a separate unit that you would typically see in the backyard or attached to a house. We will not have any discussion on that during this presentation. We are working on some separate initiatives specific to accessory dwelling units, so don't think that we've forgotten about it. It's just going to be held off for another meeting at a different time. We're also looking at some short-term rental ordinances. When we say short-term rental, that's specific to things like Airbnb and VRBO. The city of Reno right now does not regulate any of the short-term rentals. Washoe County does, that's unincorporated Washoe County, but the city of Reno does not. So we are also looking at some initiatives or some ordinance changes that we can implement specific to those 2 topics. So what we're talking about today, again, specific to zoning, is some housing initiatives. You know, as a city, we have been dealing with a housing crisis for quite some time. I think anyone that has moved to this region or tried to rent property or buy a house in this region in the last couple of years has seen that our prices are just continuing to go up. Now, this is not unique to just Reno or Northern Nevada or Nevada as a whole. This really is just a nationwide crisis that every jurisdiction really is dealing with. And it's everything from not enough supply to maybe enough supply, but the prices are too much. So this is something a lot of jurisdictions over the entire nation and country are just trying to figure out ways that they can do it different and better to help address those issues. We also have Assembly Bill 213. Our state legislature meets every 2 years, and they just finished the session for 2023. Out of that, there came a new bill that is trying to address some of the affordable housing issues. So they have now mandated that the local jurisdictions come back with their own process to expedite affordable housing. So the good news here is that as a whole state, we all deal with development differently, whether you are in City of Henderson or Clark County or Las Vegas or Reno or Sparks. We all have different zoning code regulations. And so the state basically said, local jurisdictions, come up with your own regulations, things that you guys want to do to really expedite affordable housing. So that really gave us a good opportunity to look at our own regulations rather than statewide regulations and find something that fits within our needs, and again, within specific to our community. We do have to have those adopted by July 1st. So that's really one of the big reasons why we are pushing this zoning code now and not, sitting on this for another 6 months or a year. This is something that we have to have adopted before we get to July 1st. So that was one of the really big issues that came out of the state legislature that local jurisdictions have to implement within that first year after the legislature met. So that's a big one. Now, how we came up with some of these recommendations is we looked at other jurisdictions, again, across the country, because we know everybody's dealing with these housing issues. It's not something where we said, ooh, let's just try something new that no one's thought of before. We looked at other jurisdictions and we said, well, what's working? There's a lot of Western states in particular that have taken housing initiatives and affordability to really a very extreme level in terms of some of the changes that they've made. And that's everything from, statewide allowing accessory dwelling units or statewide allowing single family in all zoning districts. So while we're looking at those things, we're not sure that that's right for the city of Reno at this time. So we wanted to do things that were scaled back from that, but yet something that we can do that can make an impact on the community. So we're going to go through each of these initiatives that we're proposing, and I'm going to tell you a little bit of data to help you understand some of the progress that we made in the past couple of years and why we're deciding to maybe move the needle a little bit further in some of these changes. So the first one is specific to affordable housing. And when we say affordable housing, that's what we would typically associate with low income or subsidized housing. We typically see subsidized housing in apartments. We see quite a few, senior affordable housing projects or family affordable housing projects. And so when I say affordable, that's the kind of the demographic or the housing product that we're focusing on. So right now, we have some policies in our zoning code that allow you to get incentives for affordable housing. So for instance, if you have a new apartment project and you're subsidizing it, again, to make it more affordable, we allow you to do things like reduce the parking that's required. We allow you to do that today. We also have what we call a density bonus, where if you have an affordability component, meaning you're lowering the rents, we allow you to build more units than the zoning code would otherwise allow. One of the challenges that we've heard from the development community is the uncertainty when it comes to getting a project approved. So for a lot of these apartment projects, they are required to go through some kind of a public hearing process. We're proposing to help fast track them and get them to a building permit process faster by exempting them from having to go through that public hearing process. So we call that an entitlement, and it may be a conditional use permit or what we call a major site plan review. With these changes, we're proposing to get them out of that, exempt them, meaning not require them to go through that, and instead they would go straight to a building permit. So the benefit to the affordable housing community is that it's time. Anytime you're required to do any kind of public hearing process, it takes time. You have to submit your application to the city, which means you have to have an architect on board and engineers on board. They have to come up with drawings, so you have to spend money to get to that point. So from that perspective, we're hoping to have the developers spend less money because they wouldn't have to go through the additional process. And then time. Anytime we have a public hearing process, it's about 3 months on a city side, just the city review to get through that. So within that 3 months, if we could save them time, I think that's something that the state legislator is asking us to do, expedite these projects. So we're proposing to do that if you can show that you have an affordability component. And how do we guarantee that that affordability will be there once the project is built? We do require that you deed restrict the property for at least 20 years. So if you come in and you say, I'm only going to charge 60% of the average median income rent, that's a set number, then you are locked into that 60% rate for the next 20 years. So again, that's how we as the city can better control that these projects will for a long period of time stay affordable. So that's kind of option number one that we're proposing. Another thing that we're doing is specific to building permits. So every project has to come in for a building permit. We process probably 10,000 building permits a year, all types of projects, housing, commercial, affordable, every single project, anything that's going to be built in the city of Reno has to go through a building permit process. That doesn't require any public review. It's strictly just a staff review. So we look at it from a zoning perspective, from a building code perspective, from an engineering perspective, and so on. So we are proposing that if you have an affordability component, you're doing an affordable housing project, that we will help you to expedite that building permit process by assigning a staff liaison. Basically, we will give you an in-house person who will kind of hold your hand as you're going through that building permit process. A typical building permit for an apartment project would take a couple months to get through that process. That's a lot of kind of going back and forth where our staff looks at it, provides comments. The developer then makes changes and provides that application back to the city. We review it again. This goes on and on for usually 3 to 4 rounds of reviews and comments. So what we're proposing here is not something that is a big deal in terms of what the public sees, but it would definitely help the developer of that affordable housing project just to get them through that process faster. And then just in terms of numbers too, we don't get a lot of those subsidized affordable housing projects on a yearly basis. We would typically get 2 to 3 projects. So from a staff perspective, this is not a lot of our time. For only getting 2 to 3 projects a year, this is something that we can do in-house. We don't have to hire new staff to do this. It's just taking time out of, again, what we don't currently offer this service, but it's something that we've seen a lot of other jurisdictions starting to do, and it's gotten pretty good reviews. So with that, let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Okay, and so density bonus. So anytime you have a project, a new development, you typically look at a parcel, a piece of land, and it's usually vacant. And then you say, well, how many units can I fit? So you're trying to figure out, where am I going to put parking and landscaping and how tall can the building be? And then the zoning district, whatever zoning district it's in, tells you how many units you can fit. So let's just say you have 1 acre. And let's say your zoning allows for 30 units per acre. So on that 1 acre, you can put 30 units. With our affordable housing density bonus that we currently have in our zoning code, we allow you to put up to 45% more units. So just for easy math, let's just assume you could put 10 units on your site. And with that 45% density bonus, now you get another 4 units. So instead of 10 units, you could do 14 units. Again, it typically doesn't have a huge impact on projects because we don't see hundreds of units coming in. But the more units we can help bring to market that's affordable, the better off we are. But what we found is that in the last 3 years, again, this is something that's been in our code already, that density bonus. In the last 3 years, we've only been able to get 1 additional apartment unit, which is pretty pathetic on our end. If you have 2 to 3 major projects coming in a year for affordable housing, and only 1 of those projects used it in the last 3 years, and they only got 1 additional apartment unit, we could do better. So what we're proposing is to add a couple new categories. Right now, we limit that density bonus for affordable housing to just projects that have a 60% AMI, meaning they're subsidizing what the market rate is at a 60% level. And so we're saying, well, we're starting to see a lot more interest in workforce housing. So that's more the 80% AMI, and then even above that, up to 120% AMI. So what we're proposing is to add those 2 new groups, that 60 to 80% AMI, to allow them to be able to use this density bonus. And then again, that 80 to 120% AMI to be able to use this density bonus. The other big difference is, again, right now we allow you to have at a cap 45% more units if you're affordable. Instead of limiting it to just 45%, we're saying if you provide that 0 to 60% AMI, let's give you unlimited density. So if you can fit more units on your site, we're not putting a cap. Fit as many as you can fit. Now, the challenge here, and I would say the problem from the developer side is you still have to provide all your other zoning requirements. So every site has to have parking. Every site has to have landscaping. We also have caps on how tall buildings can be. So if you're limited to a building that can't be taller than 5 stories, even with unlimited density, we're not letting you go above 5 stories. So you just have to do smaller units and try and get more in there. But again, even if we can get a couple more units for each of these projects, it is leaps and bounds better than we have today. And it's a small step. It's not something that's going to overdevelop our community with a bunch of just apartments. It's going to give us more affordable housing projects, those subsidized apartment projects, and allow them to have flexibility to design it, maybe a little bit smaller units. Maybe they want to have some studios where before they couldn't do that because they couldn't make it work because of the zoning. So that gives them that flexibility. Okay, so specific to affordability, this was kind of those 2 different incentives that we're offering. Now, beyond that, we also are looking at just housing in general. As we continue to grow out, one of the things we're trying to do is provide incentives for people to grow in. We are trying to encourage them to do more infill, and infill meaning areas where we've already developed. So places where we already have schools and roads, things like we already have sewer lines and water lines. And as we continue to grow out and sprawl more, it just makes it tougher for us to be able to build the city in a way that makes sense. As we see the traffic challenges with North Reno, traffic challenges with South Reno, we're trying to find things that we can do to encourage developers to want to develop in these infill areas, again, where we already have the resources and the infrastructure in place. So from that perspective, we're also looking at density bonuses for market rate apartments, meaning we're not looking at what you charge for rent. We're just looking at what you're building and encouraging you to do smaller units in these infill pockets. So our current zoning code allows density bonuses today for market rate apartments. And again, in the last 3 years, we've seen about 12 projects come through the door and use those density bonus incentives. So that's been great. So if you think, wow, 12 projects in 3 years, that must have brought in hundreds of additional units. No, we brought in an additional 60 units in 3 years. Those are the developers that did market rate, no affordability, just your average apartment or duplex, using this incentive. So again, 60 units in 3 years does not seem to be a very effective tool if we're trying to support housing and bringing it to market faster. So what we're proposing is to take another look at those density bonus kind of options. We have 3 different categories, not based on the price or the rent, but based on the size of your unit. So the smaller the unit, the more density we're trying to get. If you look at the very bottom of this list here, so if you have an apartment project or maybe a triplex or a duplex, and it's 1,000 square foot, right? Each of your individual apartment units are 1,000 square feet or less. Right now, we give you a density bonus of up to 45% more. So if you have an existing 10 units, with that density bonus, you would get another 4. So what we're proposing is to increase that density bonus up to 80%. So again, if you had 10 units and you use this density bonus, it would get you 8 more. So instead of 10 units, we'd be providing 18 units to the market. Separate from that, we have 2 other categories. Those exist today in our zoning code, that 1,400 square foot unit size. Right now, you can do a 30% density bonus. We're trying to increase that to 45%. And then again, on the next level, if you have units that are 1,800 square feet in size, right now you just get a tiny little bump with that 15% density bonus. So we're proposing again to bump that up to a 35% density bonus. And I will say for the majority of the units that in those 12 different projects with the 60 units that have come on board, the majority of those have been in the 1,000 square feet or less size, but we have had some developers that have used the 1,400 square foot or the 1,800 square foot. Most of these are really small projects, and so they just need one additional or two additional units. I will say too, we had a Motel 6 that for years was a Motel 6. And we had a housing developer buy it, and they're converting those units into apartments. Because of the zoning, the motel was allowed to be there with X number of units. I can't remember off the top of my head. But with the zoning, if they wanted to do apartments, they weren't allowed to have as many of those motel units convert to apartments and still meet the zoning code. So they were able to use this density bonus. So again, it was a great kind of reuse of an existing building where we already have parking, we already have the landscaping, the building is built. They were able then to kind of maximize that space and get the additional, I think it was 36 or 38 additional units through that density bonus. So I would say that was a great win where it wasn't new construction, it was using existing buildings, which is again, something we want to see more of.
Looks like we have a question from Billy. I'm going to move him over. All right, Billy, you should be able to unmute.
Yeah, thanks, Grace. Angela, maybe you said and I didn't catch it. What qualifies as infill? What's gonna qualify for these density bonuses?
And we have not limited it to geography. Of those 12 projects that we've seen, the bulk of them have been in pretty small areas. Wells Avenue, Midtown area, that's generally where we're seeing it. I think one of the challenges when you get to these bigger, I would say garden style apartments where they have hundreds of units, they've already maximized what they can fit on the site, right? Because they've already built they've designed generally like a 200 unit big apartment complex where they need every square footage on that site for parking and for landscaping. So that none of those projects have used this market rate density bonus. The ones that we've seen, they are generally, less than 20 units or 40 units, and maybe they want to add an additional 1 or 2 units. Most of the folks that we've seen use this have literally been like 5 to 8 units where they get 1 or 2 additional units. So it's truly these kind of pocket, I would say, developments where it's a tiny piece of property and it just gives you the ability to add 1 or 2 more units. From the developer perspective too, the biggest constraint that we're seeing is that you have to be able to fit a ton of parking in order to provide parking for your typical apartment complex. And so parking takes up a lot of square footage on land. And so oftentimes that kind of controls how many units you can fit. Even if we gave you unlimited density, your constraint is, well, you still from a market perspective have to be able to park your tenants. So that typically takes up more land than anything else on these sites. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much.
Okay. Oh, Donna, did you want to touch base on the density bonus while we're on that slide?
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, good. I had some trouble somehow getting audio at the NAB meeting that night. But yeah, it's first of all, great presentation so far, and really fast. So I'm probably not following you as well as I would have liked to. But I have I'm kind of having some trouble envisioning, like, what would these 12 projects, what would they have been able to put on there if you had increased these density bonuses under those circumstances? Do you have any idea?
So, I mean, let's just take the example of a 10 unit. So if they could do 10 units and through the density bonus, let's go back to that slide, Grace. Okay, so let's assume we had 10 units and they were 1,000 square foot in size. So per the zoning code, let's say they were allowed to have, they maxed out their zoning with those 10 units. Today, they could do a 45% density bonus. So 10 units at 45%, that would give them the ability to put in another 4 units. We're proposing to increase that density bonus to 80%. So instead of that additional 4 units, now they could do 8 units on top of what their zoning code would already allow. So again, today, if they were allowed to do 10 units with the density bonus, they could do 14. With what we're proposing, instead of 10 or instead of 14, they would get up to 18 units.
Okay, okay, I guess I'm being a little bit, hoping for a little more specificity. Like you said that you had 12 projects that utilized the density bonus and ended up with 60 additional units. So in many of the conversations that you and I have had, and that when I've heard you speak publicly, it's usually about whatever the lot can, whatever the limits of the lot are, given the other parameters of the zoning code, like you mentioned, with building height and parking, et cetera. I was wondering if you had taken a look at the 12 projects that utilized this bonus and to see, well, if they had had these increased density bonuses, would it have been possible to put more units on those projects?
Yes, yes, it would have. So as an example, we had a project on Wells. Through the zoning, they were allowed to do 7. They used the density bonus and got an additional 2.
Mm-hmm.
We had another project that had 34 units. That's what the zoning capped them at. With the density bonus, they were able to add another 6 units.
But would the lot support this new density bonus?
And
In other
that's
words,
correct. I mean, that's the challenge that they have to come up with. We do not allow them to increase the building height. You're still capped at whatever your zoning requires, and you still have to provide parking and landscaping. What we've seen a lot of these developers do is if they need more units to make it pencil. I mean, that's one thing we've heard a lot of people say is, I can't make this project pencil unless I can get 14 units on the site, and the zoning only allows me to do 10. So if they do smaller units, smaller square footage units, they can make it work. And because the zoning doesn't allow them to have more units, regardless of the size of the individual apartment, that density bonus allows them to get the additional number of units, and they can still make the rent work because they can build more units. So that's kind of the feedback we've been hearing.
okay, so maybe I'm not really understanding this, but okay, so we go back to your project who got 4 extra units on top of 10 units. So really, the constraints of the lot, like it's always about, or what I'm hearing anyways, the constraints of the lot, whatever the lot and the other code requirements are, determine what the maximum can be, because they can't go too high and they can't. So really, this is by giving them a bigger density bonus, it's encouraging smaller units so they can pack
Correct.
more into the same footprint, basically, in the same
Correct.
building height, and still keep the landscaping requirements. So this is
Correct.
essentially encouraging a buttload of smaller units in order to utilize these other things. So how does it, I mean, like how, I remember at the affordable housing thing when Councilwoman Doer brought up, how is 1,800 square foot rental unit a small? I mean,
It's
how
not.
does that?
No, absolutely. That you are 100% correct. 1,800 square foot. We have a lot of houses, single
My
family
house is
homes that are
barely bigger than
1,800
that.
square feet. Mm-hmm. Yep. So what this does is, again, it encourages those smaller units to get more. And again, from a city perspective, from a zoning perspective, we don't regulate the size of those individual units. That's something we let the developers in the market dictate. So if they're telling us, hey, if I knew I could get more studios because you allowed me to have more units, then maybe instead of 3 bedrooms or 2-bedroom type units, maybe I would do more units that are more of a studio size, if that's what they feel the market, is needing more of.
I understand the concept. What I'm struggling here with is how increasing density from 15 to 35% for 1,800 square foot unit. Similarly, with 1,400 square feet, I mean, I lived in a 900 square foot house for years, and 2-bedroom, 1 bath, perfectly happy. So that from 30 to 45%, okay, but those unit sizes, it seems to me, so then you can get a substantial density bonus. It's not doing anything for the affordability problem, because anything that's 1,800 square feet, 1,400 square feet, and maybe even 1,000 square feet, I don't know, but those are not going to be workforce level housing. I mean, an 1,800 square foot apartment, it's going to be just like the other ones in Midtown that are so expensive. I couldn't live there, I mean, all the ones around Ace Hardware and all those new ones that went in, and they're, all modern and beautiful, and they list for 600,000. These are not, these things are not addressing the real problem we have, which is how does your average bear afford rent here? So you create more units this way, but at 1,800 square feet and 1,400 square feet, those are the kind of units that we need to make a dent in the housing problem, in my opinion. So,
Yeah, I think there's two pieces, excuse me, two pieces to what we would consider the housing crisis. One is the cost of housing, the price that people are paying, but the second really is the supply. And so from a supply perspective, we're trying to encourage people to stop growing out with sprawling development and encouraging them to grow, more of these infill areas. And so this, like I said, this is not the only solution. This is one small piece of things that we can do just through zoning to help encourage development that's trying to think out of the box and trying to get more units than maybe they would otherwise be able to get through their zoning.
But this, what I read in this revised code has nothing to do with where this is gonna happen. I mean, it could happen anywhere.
It can.
You're still gonna get a density bonus. So if the goal is to encourage infill instead of sprawl, by giving somebody an 80% density bonus to make a whole mess of 1,000 square feet units, that doesn't mean they're gonna do it in the infill areas or the master plan designated infill areas, most likely not. They'll be just moving farther out, only making more small things. And I don't see the control here to accomplish the goal that the city, or that, that I'm understanding you to say is one of the goals, to increase the supply of housing. But it's like, I'm just having a conceptual problem, because you've got, yes, this is a great idea, infill, let's keep, let's avoid sprawl and all of that, but there aren't any regulations that say where it goes. So really, you're just letting people build more on this, just more.
Yeah, and
In
of
the- in
those
the-
12, yep, thanks so much for that input, Donna. Of the 12 projects that we've seen in the last 3 years that have used the density bonus, every one of them have been in these infill areas, whether it's Lander Street, LaRue, Lakeside, Taylor Street, Wheeler Street. So just based on the data, in 3 years, everyone that's used it so far has been within an infill area.
I believe you. I just don't believe that that means that's the way it's going to be. I mean, I don't know. I'm just sort of struggling with how this is. People have a problem with supply, but people with money have less of a problem with supply, and the people who are really struggling can't afford any of these things that we're talking about continuing to build. And that's where I have the problem, really. The conceptual problem. Like, how is this actually going to help the person who can't afford the rent, or help the people who are living in their cars because the rents went up? And then they're working and everything, but they can't afford the big rents anymore. I just don't
Yeah.
see that these are the answers to those questions. And if you're the one living in your car on the river, that is the big question, right? Not like making more $2,000 a month apartments for people with money. I mean, that's not, they don't care. They want to be warm. And I don't see that we're doing anything unless there's all this latitude that's going to be given to the affordable housing. I mean, maybe that'll make a difference, hopefully. But there's so many people. I mean, I have elderly friends who came just within a hairbreadth of meeting any affordability guidelines and couldn't find places to live because they couldn't go into those units. And they all have waiting lists, and that would help if you could get, more of those. But I'm not seeing this other stuff as actually accomplishing a goal that we need. That's just my opinion. So I'm just confounded a little bit by this.
Okay,
Thank
thanks
you.
for that, Donna.
Appreciate it.
Let's go ahead and move. We have a couple other people on this topic. Looks like,
Yes. I'll move Bob over right now. All right, Bob, you should be able to unmute.
That me, Bob? Yeah. Okay, thank you. I have two comments. First of all, if you have somebody that just has extensive comments to give on this, they should probably come in and meet with staff directly instead of so that other people have the time to comment in this meeting. And my comment is that let's say we have 1,050 square foot unit that we love and our customers love, and we have to go back to the architect and say, you got to hack 51 square feet out of this thing so we can get the density bonus. And the architect says, you're not going to like it, but I can do it. It would be better if you had multiple tiers, like every 100 feet, so that we don't have to try and get painfully under one of these 3 tiers. So maybe every 100 feet all the way down maybe to 700 that you have a bonus for making that target, instead of having these so far apart that it's really challenging for us to come up with a product we want, but yet meet your expectations. And thank you.
Thanks, Bob. All right, and Cindy.
you. Listen to all this, and I'm new to this city. I come from Southern Cal, and I love Reno. It's 5 years here, but I've watched it change, and I've come from a world of developers, and I understand what you're all doing, and what you're trying to meet the affordable housing needs, but I keep hearing accommodations to developers who really, what I've watched in Southern Cal, and now I'm watching here, they changed the zoning and they changed the rules. They're not doing what they're saying they're doing. The other thing that's I've noticed is that you have the infill. When you add more housing of multiple units in a city that has set streets, I am noticing in the 5 years that I've been here, and again, I love Reno. I'm watching Virginia, South Virginia is backlogged. I'm watching, we make these decisions for affordable housing, and I support that 100%. I had rentals for people that were on Section 8, which is what the government is calling it. So, but again, I don't see the infrastructure of design for the community that's living here, the streets that are existing here. I don't see the balance here. And I thank you so much that you have these Zooms and all these meetings, because I watched it in Southern Cal. The developers took over. They came in and they said, yes, we'll do that. And as soon as it got rezoned, they changed the rules. And so when I see that happening here, I have a red flag. Now, I'm not saying you're doing that or not, but I'm just saying, please step back. I just keep hearing everything is pro developer, and the developers are making money. The city is what is going to be impacted with streets. And I'm sorry, even though people say, yeah, it's affordable housing, well, they have cars. So let's look at the whole picture. Do we need to have more infrastructure for police? All these things come into play whenever you do this. So even though you're saying we're going to incentivize them, I just watched the one on McCarran, on McCarran and Plumas. I was not here at the time that something happened where they went bankrupt, and it was the, I guess, a tennis club.
Yep,
Well,
Lake Ridge Tennis Club.
yeah. And so the developer came in, they went bankrupt, they sold it to somebody else, and they were putting in, originally it was 150 retirement homes. And then the developer came in and then said it was 513 apartments, affordable housing. Then the city council said, no, downplay it. Now it's 413 condos. Well, they just dropped down the 5th floor. And what I'm saying is that I'm watching that, and no one's buying a 600 square foot home. I mean, it's a condo. I mean, and they're not building yet, but the whole issue, and I was on that saying, look at these streets. It doesn't accommodate 413 homes. It doesn't come because people have cars. No one's looking at, they're so busy looking at the affordable housing for people that need it. But I really appreciated Donna that said things and questioning it. We've got to keep questioning the whole picture. It's a strategic plan of everything. The police, the housing, where are busing? If they don't have cars, do they have bus systems there? All this stuff impacts every single person that lives in Reno and these outskirts of Reno. And like I said, the developers are coming in, and I know you want to accommodate housing, but they're coming in with agendas. And I'm sorry, I've lived there all my life in Southern Cal. I watched it destroy Southern Cal. I watched it, and I loved I was raised there. And I don't want that happening here. And they're doing the same thing here, the same thing. And I just want everyone to just step back and look at the entire picture. That's all I'm asking for. I do want affordable housing. Don't get me wrong. I do want that. But when I listen to what we're giving developers, what are they giving the city? I remember Verdi. They have a limit. I watched on the news. They have a limit of 1,000 units, and they were giving this Verdi land for the fire station. And then I watched on the news that they decided they needed 300 more units, and they sued and they won, and they got 300 units because they threatened to take away the land for the fire department. I watched that and I went, that was Southern Cal. I don't want this to become that. That's all I'm saying. Please look at the whole picture of the residents. Look at you have created such a beautiful city here. It is worth fighting for. Just don't get caught up in what the government is saying of affordable housing. I get that, absolutely. But it's not reality because most of them are not affordable. And Donna was right. They're building stuff and they're not affordable. But the developers are doing that, not the city people. They're approving it with intent. I just say, please look at the whole picture, slow down. Don't keep looking at all these things as incentives to giving developers they have PhDs in a manipulation. They know what they want, and the bottom line is the dollar. It's not about the people. The people that they're talking to really care about the people. I appreciate the city council. I appreciate all these people, everyone here. They care about the people. I care about the people here, but the developers do not. And I don't care what anyone says. I've lived it. I've watched it. That's all I'm saying. Please slow down. Look at the traffic. My God, the traffic is horrendous now. Look at that.
So, Cindy, I apologize. I might have to just cut you off.
That's okay. I just wanted to share that. So whatever is decided, but I wanted to share that so everyone had at least a different perspective and a lens to process.
Yep.
But thank you for your intent. You really mean well. I really appreciate that. But I'm going to tell you, the developers are manipulating the city, and I've seen it, and I just want to have a balance because the city is worth fighting for. Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. All right, we have, looks like two more hands raised. Art, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank you. I just, for everybody's benefit, as Angela said, and she's absolutely right, this housing thing is nationwide. I mean, almost every community everywhere is dealing with these issues for a variety of reasons. And it's actually causing, people were talking about size of units. It's causing units to shrink. We're starting to become more like the cities in Europe, which have very small units. In fact, downtown Reno, the new apartments going in, they're quite small. And there's a reason for that. I wanted to, I'm very much in favor, Angela, of your proposal for workforce housing, particularly because traffic, and I absolutely agree with Cindy. And incidentally, Cindy, I was a city planner and spent most of my career in Southern California. So we made a lot of mistakes in California, I can tell you. And thanks to the state legislature primarily. The reason I'm so much in favor of workforce housing, particularly in areas like downtown Reno, it can help reduce the traffic congestion. I mean, even in the high rises downtown, there are people in the medical professions that live there and walk to work over to St. Mary's and other places. So workforce housing is something I think is desperately needed. It helps considerably in the housing supply. And one thing that I just want to say, that one thing that people tend to forget, that affordable housing is subsidized housing. Somebody has to pay that subsidy. And that's why it's so difficult for subsidized housing to be built almost anywhere. By the way, Angela, I appreciate the fact that you're only requiring 20-year affordability covenants instead of the 35 years that we did in California, which made it that much more difficult for the development community to build affordable housing. The thing, though, that I wanted to caution the city about is one of the huge problems, errors that we made in California was inclusionary zoning. The state, in its wisdom, came down and said, we don't care. You have to build this affordability at different levels. We don't care how you do it, just do it. So a lot of cities ended up adopting inclusionary zoning standards. And the development community said, okay, we'll provide 20, 30% of the housing stock at affordability. We'll just up the rate of up the market rate, and which is one of the reasons that housing is so affordable in California. So anyway, that's really all I have to say at this point. I also agree that we have to look at the city holistically. Right now, hot topic is affordability and housing densities, but there's a lot of other factors that need to be considered as well, particularly. And one of the constraints the development community will say is impact fees are a constraint. Yes, they are a constraint, but somebody has to be able to pay for the roads and the infrastructure that be built. Okay, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Art. We have, looks like one more hand raised on this topic or this slide. Go ahead, Brian.
Hello. I'll keep my comments short just because, I'm really excited to see the rest of the presentation. Someone who had to leave Southern California because my family couldn't afford it because the cities refused to let anything be built. I'm loving these changes. I just want to see construction cranes all around Reno. I want supply, build up, build in, whatever. I just want to see some building. And I'm living in a house that was luxury housing like 40 years ago. So now it's affordable, at least to me. So thank you guys. I'm excited to see the rest of the presentation.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Okay, so that again was in terms of market rate, not affordable housing, a density bonus. So the other kind of big topic that we're proposing with the zoning code change is related to by right development. So generally speaking, when a project comes forward, they either have to go through some kind of public review process or they can go straight to a building permit process. A lot of our different zoning categories within our city do require a public hearing or review process if you have anywhere between 20 and 100 units that are being proposed. And we looked at other jurisdictions. We looked at Washoe County, Sparks, Carson, Henderson, Vegas. We looked at other cities outside of Nevada. And what are other cities requiring for what triggers an entitlement versus what can go straight to a building permit? Again, from the perspective of, well, what does it do if we take out that public review process? Because the public needs to know what's being built and to be able to write comments. Again, if one of the barriers to development is time and money and uncertainty, then this is one thing we can do to take away long time frames, additional costs to get development, and the uncertainty of never knowing if your project's actually going to be approved, or if you spend all this time and money on a project and then it gets denied, then that money is a sunk cost and a lot of times a liability when you're trying to get lenders to give you money up front to build these projects. So from that perspective, again, specific to multifamily projects, regardless of affordability, this is all projects in general. If you have less than 100 units, we're saying let them go straight to a building permit. They still have to meet all their zoning code requirements and all of their building code requirements. None of that changes. This would just take out that 3 to 4 month public review process that a lot of times they would have to go through. So again, kind of looking at what other communities do. Sparks, for instance, their kind of trigger for what requires a public review process is 110 units. So anything less than 110 units can go straight to a building permit. Some of the other communities that we looked at, they don't have any requirements for going through an entitlement process as long as they're zoned multifamily and they're proposing multifamily. Or again, our City of Reno zoning code currently has additional entitlement requirements if you are in a multifamily zoning and you're proposing multifamily and you're anywhere between 20 units and 100 units. So the small thing we can do that again is more consistent with what we're seeing from a best practices. We don't anticipate it's going to have a huge push on new development, but it will help to bring housing to market faster in some of these areas that, you know, otherwise they may not be willing to make that kind of investment if they're concerned about getting lenders that will approve them up front or the extra time it will take to get it done. So these are just things that we've seen other communities try and do as well. So we do have one hand here from Mr. Listener.
I can keep it short. If you skip all the public process, can the public still be assured that this building will not be ugly?
Well, ugly is in the eye of the beholder, so I don't know that I want to comment that yes, all buildings will be pretty. We do have standards, though. Our zoning code and our building codes have standards, so they still have to go through all of those same requirements. Just in terms of, you know, how many projects would this have impacted? So if we had this in place 3 years ago, because we were looking at all of our data from the last 3 years, we would have had 7 projects that would have gone straight to a building permit, but because this was not in place, they had to go through a public hearing process. So just again, in terms of, you know, how many additional units are we looking at? It's not that much additional change, but small enough change that we can hopefully encourage developers that may have stayed away from development in Reno because of some of these public hearing requirements. All right. And so Donna, and just again, in essence of time and being conscientious of everyone else on the call, I am going to limit everyone to 3 minutes on public comment. At the very end, if you want to provide comment, people can drop off or stay on, then we'll bring you back on for more. But Donna, let's go ahead and have you speak, but we're going to limit you to 3 minutes.
I know, I got that message from the first comment. How many projects did you say could have gone straight to building permit?
7.
7, okay, and aren't there some protections for the public process in the code or in some part of Nevada law about public process and a citizen's right to be, you know, notified or something? I mean, 100 units is a lot of units to just sort of pop up right next to, oh, I don't know, Virginia Lake Park, for example.
Yeah, so we
know?
do, yeah, we do have state law requirements and zoning code requirements. Anything that requires a public hearing, we are required to do public noticing. Our requirement is we go out 750 feet. Anyone that owns property within 750 feet of that project would receive a postcard in the mail. And then again, anytime we have a public hearing, anyone from the public, you know, is invited to participate in that process.
But if we skip the entitlement review process, then nobody knows, right?
That's correct.
Right. So it seems a little bit like a disservice to some people who live here. So, okay, thank you.
Thanks, Donna. And I think we have Cindy as well. Cindy, again, we're going to limit everyone to 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Mine will be very fast. The public has a right to know. You already have the criteria where they don't have to know. But you know what? Anything above that, the public has the homeowners, they live in that community. They've lived there. I have talked with people that have lived here for 30 years. They have the right to know. I have an issue with the entitlement that you can expand that and they don't have to know. So I just want to share with you from the homeowner's perspective. You keep talking about the developer's advantage to help, but it's the homeowners that have been living here so many years. That's all I'm going to say. So please consider the homeowners.
Okay, thanks, Cindy. Anyone else, Grace? Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the next topic. This is really our last one on these housing initiatives. We call it the missing middle. So missing middle is kind of a buzz term we're hearing again across the country. Everybody's talking about missing middle. This is basically anything that's not an apartment project and not single family. It's everything kind of in the middle. You know, typically with an apartment, you pay rent. Most single family homes, there's a mortgage, somebody's paying a mortgage, so there's that ownership. But what about that middle ground where maybe you can't afford or maybe you don't want do you even have to take care of the maintenance on a single family home? Is there some alternative where you could live, different kind of housing product type that's not an apartment and not a single family home? So we would kind of associate things like a duplex, a triplex, maybe a townhome or a condominium as kind of that missing middle. It's generally, more cost effective to live there compared to a single family home. But you still get home ownership a lot of times, or maybe you just don't want a big apartment and you want something smaller, more quaint, like a duplex where you still rent, but in not such a big type building. So we looked at our zoning code and we said, where do we currently allow things like duplex, triplex, and fourplex? And should we expand on where we allow those? So generally speaking, we allow those duplex, triplex, fourplex in all of our mixed use zoning, all of our multifamily zoning, and in just 2 of our single family zoning districts. So we said, well, maybe we should expand that. So we have 2 additional single family zoning districts. One's called SF3, one's called SF5. These are lots that are generally between 9,000 square feet and 15,000 square feet. And that's about a quarter of an acre. So these are fairly decent sized lots. So we propose that we're going to allow the duplex, triplex, and fourplex within those 2 new additional zoning districts, but with a caveat that they do have to go through a public hearing process through a conditional use permit. So we're not proposing to allow those in those new zoning districts by right. We're proposing that they would still have to go through the public hearing process so that the neighbors can comment and the staff can review it and make sure it's a good fit for the neighborhood and it's designed, again, to make that neighborhood feel like the community that it is and not make it something that so jumps out as different. So we did provide a couple pictures. And again, these are not unique to Reno. These are just pictures that we've seen to just give people an example of when we talk about a duplex or a triplex. Here's some examples where we've seen some more modern type design development. And so, they look great. They can fit into an existing neighborhood. It doesn't have to be something that takes away the look or the value of your house if you live next door. So again, things that we're trying to do, small steps, from the perspective of how many duplex, triplex, fourplex units does the city of Reno get? We don't get a whole lot of those. Just generally speaking, over the last 3 years, we've had probably 26 duplex units citywide in 3 years. So not a whole lot of duplexes being built. Triplex, we have even less being built. We've had about 14 triplex units in the last 3 years come forward. And then fourplex, so those 4 units attached to each other, we've had about 10 of that housing product come forward in the last 3 years. So something different, more cost effective than single family homes, whether you're a millennial or, maybe you just don't want to have to deal with a yard and you're looking to downsize. This is a good type of housing product that Reno doesn't have a whole lot of. So we're trying to find new ways to get some of these other housing types to the market. Looks like we do have one comment from Bob.
Thank you. My question is, if SF3, that's 3 units per acre, is that correct?
Uh-huh.
Well, does that mean that somebody could build 3 triplex units and get 9 total units, or does this not increase density?
No, so we specifically limit this. You cannot use the density bonus. If you're in a single family zoning, you can either build, a house, or you can build a duplex, triplex, fourplex. You still have to be able to make it fit on the lot, have to meet your parking requirements, but you cannot use the density bonus if you're in that single family zoning.
I'm not sure that I understand your answer. Does that mean that by using this provision that I can get more than 3 units on an acre?
No, and again, it depends on how big your parcel is. So if you are on a lot that's 9,000 square feet, most land that is zoned as SF 5, that is a minimum lot size of 9,000 square feet. So typically, if you're zoned SF5, your lot is 9,000 square feet. So with this scenario, you have a lot that's 9,000 square feet. You could put 1 duplex or 1 triplex or 1 fourplex.
Okay, so just to clarify, I could get more units. I could put on an SF5, I could get 5 triplexes if I could fit them for 15 units.
No, so you have to have at least 9,000 square feet and you can put one of these. If you had 20
Okay.
acres, if you had 20 acres zoned SF5, you would have to break those out into different parcels, and each of those individual parcels could put a duplex or a triplex or a fourplex. But
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. This time I understand. Thank you, Angela, for
thanks, Bob.
a couple rounds.
All right, Donna, looks like you're next.
Thank you for clarifying that you can't put a density bonus, because that was one of my questions, because I didn't see that any place in the red line document that you could not add a density bonus to duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes.
Yes.
So I don't know what that is. Maybe some point you can email me that reference, because I couldn't find it.
Yep.
So that was great to know that. But I have a comment, which is that, again, it goes to the big picture of what we're really trying to accomplish here. And what I'm beginning to think of is lip service to character integrity of existing neighborhoods, or preservation of existing neighborhoods, or whatever it is like that, because I believe that you should just be honest and tell everybody in single family zoning that they are all actually now multifamily zoning if they get a conditional use permit, which is likely, depends, but quite likely it would go through. But nobody who lives in single family neighborhoods believes that they're going to be living in a multifamily neighborhood. And in the older neighborhoods, as you've heard me say before, this, I believe, is something that will encourage tear downs of old homes, because you can make a heck of a lot more money if you go up to Northwest and just tear down one of those things that's on a decent sized lot and put a fourplex up there. I mean, because I saw in the code, it says you can't have a house and a duplex because only one primary thing, right? So you just take out the old house and put a fourplex in. And I think it's a mechanism to encourage decimation of existing neighborhoods, basically.
Yeah, I mean, fair comment. So we have allowed currently for years, we've allowed duplex, triplex, and fourplex in some of our single family zones. That's been there for years. Nobody's doing it. Not that they can't, people just aren't doing it.
Right, I understand that, but it's only been there since new Title 18, actually. I mean, it wasn't in there prior to 2018. And so it hasn't been that much time, and people can't make that much money right now on that. But these things is because they can stuff more into Midtown. Midtown's not single family. The part where all the big new expensive townhomes and stuff, it's not single family zoned right there. So it's not kind of the same thing. But like was brought up at the council meeting about well, let me just skip to the end here. What happens with the neighborhood outreach? I asked Grace this the other night, but the neighborhood outreach that council directed, because there was concern that people should know what is now possible and what could be happening in neighborhoods, and in the way of picking where different things are appropriate, not appropriate, etc. And I've expressed a desire to see maps of where this can happen. And so did Naomi and other people on council, and I'm wondering about that element then, about the going to outreach to neighborhoods, so people can know how their neighborhoods might change and might be able to lob in an opinion about how they feel about it.
Specific to the housing initiatives, or just everything we do in general, or give me a little bit more
The housing
direction?
initiatives. Okay, the housing initiatives that were discussed during the special council meeting, when all of these things came out of the Title 18 update, and now you're presenting them as no big deal edits as items, a housing initiative, and there was discussion about neighborhood outreach and impact on existing areas, as particularly in Wells Avenue. Maybe they would have a right to know, or would have an opinion about how their neighborhood gets developed or something. And I just think it's yes, that's my question. There was a directive, I thought, given by council about neighborhood outreach in existing neighborhoods, about how all this stuff can change the character of existing neighborhoods, basically.
Yeah, so maybe just for the broader group, for this particular, these zone changes related to housing, we have tried to do a big push. We have, hundreds of people on our mailing list or email mailing list. We've reached out to Channel 2, Channel 4, Channel 8. They put it on their website. They've done news. We've had interviews. We are attempting to reach as many people as much as we can. We use social media for those of you that use the City of Reno, Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. For those of you that don't use social media but watch the news, again, we have done interviews with all 3 local news channels. We're trying the best we can. If there's people that we are missing, again, we are open to You tell us how we can better serve you as a community. We are happy to come to your groups and talk about these things. We are holding 3 virtual meetings just specifically to talk about housing. And so that's what this is. I will say we held 9 meetings to talk about some changes we had on the zoning code that were not attended well at all. So we changed direction and we tried to reach out more, again, more social media, more local news, reaching out to more emails. So the better that you can tell us how to reach your neighbors and your friends, we are definitely open to suggestions. And again, maybe let's not waste any more time with this group, but send us an email, Donna, if you have suggestions, or anyone else on this call. We will gladly set up meetings or come to your group. Tell us what we can do to help you.
Go to the NAB.
We did include every single NAB member. I think we've sent out probably, I don't know, 10 emails encouraging NAB members to show up or to share with their different groups. We just haven't gotten a lot of input from any of the groups.
That's unfortunate.
But
Okay,
like
well,
you said,
thank
we
you.
will gladly come to anyone's barbecue or HOA if you want to hear more. All right, Donna, thank you for that. Cindy.
Thank you so much. And thank you for what you just said. I think what's happening is that there's a lot of changes happening in Reno, and you're experiencing it. I thank you so much, Angela, for taking the time. I've already lived through it because of where I came from. But what I've noticed is that when you start rezoning, and I have an issue with the single family home environment, because when you start rezoning, which is what they did on McCarran and Plumas, they rezoned, and then the developer, there's a window of what the parameters are within that rezoning. They went to the max. And when you start putting in duplexes and other things in single family home environments, and it does devalue the homeowners of the single family. I don't care. This is new. Yes, you have them in other areas, but they're planning on doing that for other areas that are more established, that the homes are worth more. And I'm just saying, when you start putting duplexes in, and yes, you have a public forum to say something, we voiced our opinions on the Plumas, the Lions, 413 units, and the city council voted against us. We did all that because they rezoned it, and then the developer changed it, but the city council didn't renege on the zoning when they were being lied to. So again, there's more to this. So when you start going into the single family home areas, I have an objection to that because it does affect our value of our homes, regardless of what anybody tells you. Again, let's look at the whole picture. I truly want affordable housing for people. But I want it realistic. I want it in a place that they don't have to have cars, that they can get on a bus system and they can be successful to get to their jobs, whatever it is. But just giving developers rezoning access to all these different plugs within our city is giving them the freedom to abuse us, which is what they did in Southern Cal. I just don't want this to be Southern Cal. I love this city. Please have a balance. That's all I ask for. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Grace, let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. All right, so again, those were kind of the high level topics, changes specific to subsidized affordable housing, and then a couple changes more specific to that infill and missing middle type housing. So in terms of next steps, we do have another meeting scheduled for Tuesday, a same virtual meeting. So if you want to come back, maybe you didn't catch something, or you have some feedback that you wanted to say out loud that you weren't able to do today, I encourage you to attend Tuesday's virtual meeting. We also have a website where you can provide written comments, or you can just send them in by email as well. Next step then is, once we get through these January meetings, we're going to take this information and go to the Reno Planning Commission. This will be a public hearing, so you are welcome to come and attend and provide your feedback. That will be on February 7th. We'll be proposing language to the Planning Commission. They are a recommending body, so anything they recommend, that information will then go to the Reno City Council. Council will be hearing the information around March or April. We have to go twice to City Council. So again, there'll be more public hearings, more opportunities if you wanted to provide something on the record in front of council. Make sure you just watch for agendas and look for the housing initiative topic. And then if you want to provide feedback just on our website, we do have on our City of Reno website, we have a separate link tied to all the changes we're proposing with the zoning code. So we have a link in there where you can provide public comment. Again, you can provide it on the website. You can also send it in by email. The more information we get, the more feedback we get, I think the better off we are. We had some good lively comments today. We heard from, I think, 3 or 4 people. So there's another 50 people on this call. If there's other people that have an opinion that maybe didn't feel comfortable saying it out loud, or maybe want to think about it before they provide comments, this is a great opportunity. The more information we get from you as the community, the more we can take to Planning Commission and City Council and say, you know, here's what the community likes or doesn't like about what we're proposing. And we also want to help promote a survey that we have out to the community specific to accessory dwelling units and short-term rentals. Council asked us to get some neighborhood feedback on whether or not this community wants us to start allowing accessory dwelling units. Those are those granny flats. And if they want to start allowing or regulating short-term rentals. So before we propose to do anything, we are trying to get community feedback. So we have a survey going. It's about, I think, 9 questions. Here's a link. We also have this on our City of Reno website. It's also going to be in the news. It's going to be out through social media. We're sending it out by email. So the more we can get this out to the community, the more feedback we can then take to council. This is, again, the topic of whether you support you know, the city creating an ordinance on accessory dwelling units and creating an ordinance to regulate short-term rentals. We've had the survey out for about a week and a half, and we've actually had some pretty good feedback. It's hard to get information from people anymore. Everyone's just so busy, but we've gotten quite a few good comments of saying, yes, I like it, but maybe not in this neighborhood, or, oh, I would love it in my neighborhood. So give us that information. There's also information where you can provide addresses if there's like an area or a neighborhood where you live, where you want it or you don't want it. So gives us a little bit more information, and we'll be more equipped to go to council and tell them, here's what the neighbors and community members have said. And then with that, they'll determine if we move forward with those initiatives or not. All right, and so that ends today's presentation. It's about 6:15. I thank everyone who stayed on the line. We do have a couple people that want to provide feedback or comments, so let's go ahead and start moving people over. Okay, Rosa, it looks like you are moved over.
Yeah, hi. My name's Rosa. I'm a renter in Reno. I just heard you talk about how few affordable housing projects there are each year. And I know I've seen the statistic that in the last 10 years was 93 or 94% of the new apartments built in Reno were luxury apartments. And I wonder, you've presented a couple different ways of incentivizing affordable housing. I just wonder if there's any discussion of, like, at what point, you know, if we can continue to have so few affordable units constructed, do you move from not just incentivizing, but requiring it in some form? I know we had some negative comments about inclusionary zoning earlier tonight, but through maybe some sort of inclusionary zoning or some sort of workforce housing requirement like what Truckee has. And I just wonder if those kind of like requirements are, you know, would ever be discussed.
Yeah, and I think that is something even at the state level they've brought up every 2 years. Again, our state legislature meets and they've talked about requiring statewide inclusionary zoning. To this point, those initiatives have not moved forward. I know I keep hearing discussions about rent control and you know, eviction regulations and inclusionary housing. So I don't want to say that it's on the table or not on the table. I think we'll continue just I mean, as a region, I think we'll continue to have those discussions. I don't see anything in the near future where City of Reno is proposing those changes, but I think as a region, where all of us as local jurisdictions are having those discussions about what more can we do, you know, and not just one jurisdiction after another, but like as a region, how do we deal with housing where we're all on the same page and providing the same incentives or the same disincentives, you know, to help get housing to market and especially that affordability component.
Right, thank you.
All right, Donna.
Okay, hi, Angela, I think you did a great presentation, and Grace, you too. And I do think that, I don't know if you got responses from NAB members, but if you were giving a presentation similar to this at the board, I think it would have, people would engage with you. It would have, you know, just like with Grace at the other night at that meeting, I'm sure that I mean, she got questions and comments, and I think it would make people more inclined to pay attention to what the changes are in this part of the code. So for what that's worth, seems like
Okay.
it would be a thing to do. And then I have a technical question that should be pretty easy, I think, for you. It's under the specific standards for single family attached. There's a line in here where, you know, where the entitlements is going away in SF5, SF5, SF8, and SF11 up to 100 units. How can you even build something that's 100 units in those zones? I mean, how is that even possible?
Yep, so depending on how big your lot is, if you own a parcel and it's an acre in size, and maybe it's zoned SF5, then you can put more units on there. If you have a lot that's 9,000 square feet, obviously you can't put many units on there. But we have a lot of parcels that are zoned for small, you know, zoning standards, but they actually have a lot of acreage to them. We're also
Oh,
seeing, yeah, I mean, we're also seeing in a lot of these undeveloped areas where maybe you have 2 or 3 parcels with a small zoning like that SF, you know, 5 zoning. And maybe all 3 of them, let's say for instance, are undeveloped. So you can combine 3 parcels, it's vacant, and make a bigger parcel, and then you can get more units.
and is that an appropriate thing to do in that zoning? I guess I'm again not understanding. If you have an SF5 and you build 100 units, it's still a single family neighborhood, even if you have a huge chunk of
Yeah.
even if you have 3 acres. I mean,
Yeah. And I can't think of a single location in the city of Reno that has a single family zoning where you would put 100 units. Again, this is to be able to get different types of densities. We're not proposing that it's only 100 units. We're proposing maybe 20 units because you can fit 20 units, or maybe 15 units. So this isn't requiring everyone to build 100 units. We're just saying up to 100 units. Again, most of our infill smaller projects are closer to like 40 units, dependent on where they're at, how big the parcel is. So it's case by case. I don't know that I have a generic one, you know, stop answer for what you're asking, but we don't typically see 100 units in a small infill area just because you can't squeeze that much on a small parcel.
right, I get that. But I mean, if you did have huge parcels, but that are zoned, are you doing this so that they don't have to go to rezoning? Go through the rezoning process for densification and can just do it anyway?
No, so again, as a city, we're trying to come up with ways to get more housing, more supply. And so these are things that we're hearing are roadblocks, right? When developers tell us, hey, I had 40 units and I had to go through a public hearing process. It took me, you know, 6 months to get through and I had to completely redesign it. That would be a roadblock. So we're trying to help those developers to get through those roadblocks and not have to deal with those things that otherwise they could go straight to a building permit because it meets the zoning code and it meets the building code.
But nobody cares about the people who live around them, I guess.
And we looked at other jurisdictions, you know, again, looking at what other communities in Nevada are doing. We're unique. The other jurisdictions around us, and even in Southern Nevada, they don't use that same threshold. They typically say, if you're multifamily and you meet the zoning code, go straight to a building permit. If you have, you know, less than 110 units, go straight to a building permit. So we're not doing something that is out of the ordinary. That is typical. for
This
what
is a
other
single
communities
family,
do.
though. That's why it's a single family zone, not a multifamily zone. That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah, no, yeah, I appreciate that comment. Thanks, Donna.
Because it doesn't make any sense. And again, I would really love to see on a map somewhere where these things are possible, because that would probably answer many of my questions. you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
How can I go about
We'll
finding a
we'll
map?
come up with some examples, and we'll put it in an email and send that to you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, Angela.
Thanks, Donna. All right, Brian. Looks like we're gonna move you over next.
All right, thank you very much. I'd like to just say that I am a property owner and I have the right to modify my property. You know, I can demolish my bathroom, add new flooring, whatever, but I don't have the right to tell my neighbor what they want to do with their property. And I don't think the most vocal people should get to interfere with what goes on the land around them. And I also don't want to live in a museum city, because I remember after the Great Recession, how everything was frozen. And things look a lot better now without seeing half-built parking garages dotting the skyline. And last, increasing housing supply overall helps affordability. We've seen that in places like Minneapolis, and places that refuse to build like San Francisco become unaffordable. So thank you. And I would love to buy one of those townhouse properties that you pictured previously. So have a great evening.
Thank you, Brian. All right, Mr. Borchardt.
Hey, thank you guys so much. Making these changes to zoning code are extremely important, especially on the infill. That's probably where they're going to be most impactful. I did want to make a comment beyond just zoning and also extend the invitation to you. We've put together a focus group to try to implement the electronic map signature process. And while doing so, helping streamline our subdivision final map process, which when I first moved to Nevada almost 10 years ago, took about, sorry, I'm a little sick, guys. Took about 9 months to get through. And now some of my projects are taking close to 15 months to get through permitting. In Southern Nevada, just for reference, it takes about 6 months to get approval. So that has a significant delay on time value of money, on interest carry with increasing interest rates, borrowing at between 13 and 15% on construction projects. All of that trickles into the cost of housing, especially for sale housing. So inviting you guys to come to that, being active participants with a great group of people to try to figure out how to streamline that final mapping process.
Perfect. No, we definitely are part of that. I call it technical group or whatever you want to call it. There's several of us at Reno, I think, that got the email, so we will definitely be participating to see what we can do to help with that.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, it looks like we have one more comment. Mr. Listener.
Thank you. And thank you for this outreach. It's very appreciated. And it's hard for me at least to say I never heard about it, because here I am. I volunteer a lot in Reno, and in particular with young people entering the workforce, and they are really caught in a bad situation trying to find housing. And what would work for the ones I know is 400 square feet that's theirs, under $1,000 a month. And I would encourage you to take those density bonuses all the way down to that level, because 400 square feet that's theirs, they don't have to share it with some unreliable person that was supposed to be a good roommate. It would be very attractive. And thank you.
No, that's good feedback. Thanks, Bob. Okay, so with that, unless we see any more kind of virtual hands, I apologize, I should have said this earlier. We also have Carlos on the phone. He works with us at the City of Reno. He's one of our team members. He is here if we have any questions that need a Spanish translation, so I apologize, I should have said that first. If there is anyone out there, know that we do have that option. We can set up a separate meeting and have a translator there to help us have a better dialogue. So feel free to share that as well with any of your friends or coworkers that would benefit with having a translator in the room. Okay, and with that, I see no more virtual hands, so we will go ahead and end the meeting. Thank you so much for spending tonight's hour and a half. I know time is precious. Everyone has family and friends and lives, so we appreciate you taking time out of your night just to stay with us and talk about this very important topic. So have a great night, everyone.